want to give Eddie, the Director of Marketing and Communications from Visit Big Bear, the opportunity to chime in as well. Eddie, you and your organization have started creating some best practices for your community to kind of help facilitate the reopening of individual properties and businesses. What kind of process are you going through as you're navigating that with your partners?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, and thanks for having me. This webinar has been very educational, and I've found that you guys have done the best job in really preparing us with some tools and some useful things for us to utilize during this time. So thank you for that. Big Bear Lake is, some of you might be familiar with the destination, but we are a mountain lake town in Southern California, about 100 miles east of Los Angeles, which is our main market. We're primarily a drive market destination, and we're a small town. So we have about, in the entire valley, you know, maybe around 15,000 full-time residents. But in the city of Big Bear Lake itself, that's about 5,000. So it's very small, and our economy is almost entirely focused on tourism, with a lot of the businesses sort of being very small mom and pop, independently owned businesses that don't have a lot of resources. And there's not a lot of built-in resources in Big Bear Lake for these businesses. So a lot of them have struggled with submitting their PPP requests and things like that. So they really need as much help as they can get from, you know, anyone. The governor of California has really sort of held tight to not opening up California right away, taking more of a cautious approach to, you know, how California will reopen. But we do suspect or expect, you know, through the different phases that he's kind of outlined, in the next couple of weeks, things will begin to be reopened. And in terms of what is going on locally, the city council has put together a committee to basically create a rule book for how businesses will be able to reopen, probably similar to some of the guidelines that are already kind of being created for states that are reopening, like Texas. And so there's kind of already been a rule book created, but you know, that's not enough for a lot of these small businesses. And us as sort of a prominent organization in the community really feels like we need to kind of step up and give them something a little bit more, you know, more in detail, more prepared for what they're going to have to do. Basically, you know, there's sort of, we've seen these 6 workplace essentials, and our guide is kind of prepared on these 6. So for lodging, for recreation, for retail, and for restaurants, you know, we're sort of preparing this collection of guidelines that sort of outline how to go about preparing your building for reopening, how to educate and train your staff, and making sure that they understand, you know, how things will have to operate after a COVID-19 reopening, making sure that your business is establishing a controlled access plan so they're not being too overwhelmed with too many, you know, people visiting the business at once, which would also include kind of the social distancing plan, and then obviously eliminating or removing any possible touch points that can be avoided, as well as, you know, really cleaning and disinfecting any touch points that can't be. So, you know, door handles, countertops, things like that. And then basically using that plan to, you know, communicate to the visitors and to the residents, hey, we as a community are really doing this this project or this plan to really establish your trust that as much as possible, we're minimizing the risk of community spread from COVID-19. So that's sort of our goal is to basically complement whatever the rules are going to be with essentially a playbook for best practices for these businesses that aren't really connected to larger organizations. Most of our hotels are independently owned. We actually, our private home rental companies vastly outnumbers the number of traditional lodges. So it's a little bit unique for us, but it's definitely a great time for us to step into this role as we begin to work towards our T-bid renewal as well. So I definitely see this as an opportunity for us as much as it is, something that we're trying to solve a problem with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eddie. And I know that you are still working on that best practices document, but once it is complete and it's been shared with your community, you've also agreed to share that with us so that we can pass that on to everyone here as well, so that you can so that everyone here just know that, as the Visit Big Bear team finishes up their documentation, we'll be sharing that out so you can kind of see the direction that they're going to support their community, and hopefully use that as a resource for some of the things that you're working on for your individual community.